Everyone has a little obsession. Mine is watching people. Coffee shops, the park, the gum wall. I don't care. Even all of you in front of me right now. I am the only person I know who enjoys waiting at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Because when you watch people, once you see their physical characteristics, you start noticing their behavior in the way they wield their power in the world. It's that power that I'm here to talk to you about today. When I was in high school one morning, I was walking from the bus stop to my school when suddenly I became aware of someone walking next to me. I looked and I saw a boy with dirt on his face and holes in his shoes. As I made eye contact with him, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a knife, and told me to hand over my money. I don't know why my brain's fight or flight response didn't kick in. Actually, that's not true. I do know why. Because this was Bogota, Colombia in the 90s, and getting mad was a fairly regular occurrence. I knew the drill, but this time, as I handed the coins in my pocket, I found myself asking him why he was doing this. Since he already had my money and we were both walking in the same direction, he answered me. He said, "I live in the drug house on the corner. I get tired of my parents' beatings. So I left home, and I swear I'll never go back." He was mugging me because he needed my money to live. He was 10 years old. I listened to his story, and then I explained that even though I understood his situation, the money I had given him was money that I needed too. Without it, I'll be stranded. It was my bus fare home. I said, "I bet you had more money than I right now." The boy stopped walking, reached into his pocket, pulled out some of the coins and bills, looked at them, looked surprised, and then handed me enough money to get home. Without knowing it, my questions and the simple act of listening to that boy made him feel included in the world in his decision-making. I had shared with him when no one else ever had: power. Instead of a power struggle, it was power sharing. Most people think about inclusion as inviting others to the table, but at that table, they proceed to set the rules for who gets to eat first or last. Unfortunately, most people don't know that the way they manage their power influences others' feelings of inclusion. I know that to feel fully included, my ideas must influence decision-making processes, and I must be allowed to fully participate in our social systems. Thus, I propose that we redefine inclusion as the act of sharing power to drive equity in each of our interactions. Of course, inclusive power isn't limited to personal relationships. When organizations don't share their power and employees don't feel included, there are negative consequences. Have you ever been to a restaurant where you can instantly tell that employees don't feel valued? Maybe it's not a restaurant. Maybe it's the Department of Motor Vehicles. Lots of power struggles, very little power sharing. When I was in college, I received the worst call of my life. My mom sobbing said, "Venus, your sister has been murdered. Come home right away." My final exams were about to start, but of course, I dropped everything and went home. I felt like half of me had died. But although her journey had ended, mine hadn't, and I had to pull myself together and continue in life. When I returned to school, I found out that I needed to pay for each exam I had missed as per school policy. The fees weren't huge, but they were significant to a poor student. So I went into my professor's office and I asked if he would waive the fees for me. He looked me in the eye and said, "Venus, stop being a victim. I can't make concessions for you." It was like a slap in the face. Not only did I think his decision was unreasonable, I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. But it didn't matter. He had all the power and I had none. And that was the way it was going to stay. It was a power struggle. Looking back, it's possible that his focus on enforcing organizational rules made him blind to his power and his ability to drive inclusion. It's easy to fall prey to organizational power dynamics. Think about your own life. Have you ever felt trapped in organizational power dynamics? We come into organizations and social situations expected to fit in and be among like-minded people. But so often, we find ourselves in a power struggle. We think we're playing puzzles, and instead, we're playing chess. When organizations empower their employees to think for themselves and use their own discretion, employees share that power of inclusion with those they interact with. Inclusion, the act of sharing power, is like asking someone to pull a rubber band at the other end while you're holding it and trust that they won't let go of it. Instead of snapping that rubber band on my face, my professor could have lobbied the administration to change the rules for people in similar circumstances. Doing so would have made him a leader. A great example of someone who understood the power of inclusion was a professor I had at Boise State. When I came into the US, I didn't know any English at all. So my first year in a US college, as you can imagine, was very difficult. But I was ambitious. So when someone explained to me that to get into a master's or a PhD track, I needed to find a professor who can let me be his research assistant, I knew I had to do it. I figured, go big or go home. So I went right to the chair of the department, Dr. Charles Hunt. He was 6'3", and he scared the life out of me. I think I said, hello, and then in broken English, I asked if I could be his research assistant. He invited me to come in and asked me where I was from. I said, Colombia. Even now, whenever I tell people I'm from Colombia, they say something around drug cartels or the TV show Narcos. All Dr. Hunt said was, what a beautiful country. He asked me about my academic background, and he offered me a position as a research assistant. He even had me write a paper for a conference the same semester. Remember, I could barely express basic thoughts in English, let alone write out the technical terms of polygraph research. But he patiently coached me too. He had everything, and I had nothing. So he gave me something, power. One little secret that most people don't know is that when you share your power, when you include others, not only does it have an immediate benefit, it earns interest because you never know who's watching. When people start noticing you being inclusive, you gain access to new opportunities, gain influence, and the support of others. So in actuality, you would achieve more. So how can you share your power to include others and transcend any social system? Dasher Kellner, a researcher at UC Berkeley, has done a lot of research on power. And building on his research, I identified 3 ways I share my power. 1, empathy. I exercise empathy like a muscle and focus on serving others. Frequently, I ask people, what do you need to succeed, and how can I support you? People often struggle to answer the question because they don't know how to articulate their needs. So I had to listen not only with my ears, but also with my heart. That is what I learned from the nameless boy in the street. 2, humility. Embarrassingly, I confess that humility is not my middle name, and it does not come naturally to me. However, I try to be aware of my power and its impact on those who have less power than me in any given situation. For instance, I may acknowledge being wrong to a junior person in my team when we're debating a contentious issue. 3, be an ally. In our schools and organizations, there are people feeling powerless. In my work, I try to speak up for them or open a space for their voices to count. No doubt, Dr. Hans was my best ally because he was my mentor, coaching me through while I barely spoke English. And then, when the time came to apply for graduate school, he became my best ally, writing dozens of letters of recommendations on my behalf to several schools. Now, imagine a world where everyone shares their power to include others. And you are the catalyst of that world. At any point in your social interactions, you will feel powerless or powerful. And it's what you do with your power that determines how equitable the world around you is. Let me leave you with this. If I was able to unlock the power of a nameless 10-year-old through empathetic listening, you can too. Because no matter where you are in life, you have value and you have power. You also have the ability to share that power. When you share your power to include others, you don't just leave a footprint, you leave a legacy. That is the power of inclusion. Thank you.